I relate the events of the Ukraine recently in Russia to an attempted restoration of power which has long been lost to our own government, for example, and this exemplifies the differences between our nations, the differences which we have made through our own devolution. Now, as far as technology is concerned, I relate to this billion before. Like technology, it comes through power and perception. Now, power cannot be exercised by what is perceived. I don't think, anyway. But it can be said that it can only be perceived. It can only be exercised by what can be understood from that perception. Moscow's invasion of the Ukraine also spooked historically neutral countries like Sweden and Finland, which are now seeing a surge in support for joining NATO, used to ease fear across Russian military blocs. Now that was said by The Independent. But on the other hand, we have a solidified nation defending itself against oppressors, as it has done for thousands of years. This cannot be attributed to us. We are not obliged to help any of them at the end of the day. It's said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a misunderstanding of ourselves. Carl Jung said that. He had a good point going on, I think. I'm not entirely sure. But at the end of the day, there was an agreement of alliance back in the day. In 1922, Soviet Russia, Soviet Ukraine, Soviet Belarus, and the Transcaucasian SFSR created the USSR. Now, this was the solidifying of three nations, three blocks, three potent nations. They all decided to become one, and now and then the Ukraine wanted their freedom. They then fought for their freedom. They got their freedom through political and other struggles. The point is that this has been bolstered as a whole war surrounding that whole conflict in itself, the conflict between the nation states, which do not include us. They are different peoples. Ben Wallace said, as the conflict intensifies, the Russians are changing their tactics, and so the Ukrainians need to. They need to change their tactics, and they've done this terribly well. He said, it is vital, therefore, that the Ukraine maintains its ability to fly and suppress Russian air attacks. Now, that was like the Daily Express. I mean, what can we tell from the Daily Express? But it does say that it is a conflict which really solidifies other states, not ours. We are weak. They are not, because they have the ability to solidify. Their army is comparatively larger. It's differently formulated. We are accountable to Western law. They can be contended, not so much. Now, the external conditions for Russian economy have drastically changed. This is what the bank said in the statement, putting it out rather mildly, adding that it expects to increase and to ensure a rise in deposit rates. Now that was a response, right? A response from the economic sanctions from the West. It was a response from the Russian central bank. Okay, they're saying that they can expound and decrease this power. Lenin said in 1901, "We are marching in a compact group along a precarious and difficult path, firmly holding on to each other by the hand. We are surrounded on all sides by enemies, and we are constantly under fire." Now that just underlines and fragmentizes the separation of states. Putin's sanity is not in contention here. He is not necessarily an insane person. He is the solidification of the state which he rules. He is severe, and he does have the old Russian surrounding him. He's in the Kremlin, and when he sits down, he's sitting in a great big state room, not like us. We are enclosed ourselves within the parliamentary system, which is conservatism at its height, and proves we are codependent on other nations because we are so insulated. The Russians are pushing. They're pushing through. They're pushing through the power. We are striving. They said we are striving to preserve the integrity of the Ukrainian nuclear plants. This was said by Emmanuel Macron, by the French. Now they're a different state as well. But what they're doing, like us to some degree as well, they're putting their hand out. It's only with our preconceptions. Past. Look at documentaries, for example. Those documentaries, social media things. They put on Netflix or Amazon. These stylized documentaries, which, while instructional, quite interesting, and very good in production values, quite excellent, really. I mean, the documentary called Rome on Netflix. There's another couple as well that have to be perused. I think we have to take on board the fact that conquering nations and colonialism also has to be acknowledged. I mean, not necessarily in a good way, but what you see, the invasion by the Mongols back in the day, that in itself is instructional, because we may look at the fact that, someone once said, indeed it was Leon Trotsky, the end may justify the means so long as there is something that justifies the end. I think it was Leon Trotsky. Yes, it was Leon Trotsky. Now, if we take that into account and we equate that with the way in which we are currently looking at civilization in the West, for example, as I stated before, the ideals we are currently propounded upon, the kind of BLM movements, the way in which society in England and in Wales and Scotland, indeed the UK, and in fact to a large extent America as well, is fracturing itself. We then have to take on board the fact that perhaps there is some degree of inconsistency in the way in which we are approaching our way of life and looking at other people's way of life. So that is intrinsic, other people's way of life. Now, Karl Marx, for example, said, a spectre is haunting Europe. Spectre of communism. I'd like to stipulate at this point that I in no way feel that either the Ukrainian or the Russian people deserve or even be asked for this kind of treatment. Indeed, among many others, I have seen tracks of social media articles and clips and of the atrocities occurring over there over the last few weeks. Yet again, we have hunger issues, as with centuries ago, being bombed of streets, and enforced laws, curfews, and lockdowns. Does this latter sound familiar to anybody? But that is exactly what I'm pointing out here. We're all coming from a historically Western perspective. That will be our downfall. Ideologically speaking here, if there is a cognitive viewpoint that holds up the need for intervention, dispassionality, as far as viewpoint is concerned, is another matter. It seems that the vast majority of Britons are still willing to shoulder yet more sanctions against Russia, despite what it would cost them. Would the Ukrainians have done the same functional opinion if the boot was on the other foot? The answer is subjective, I suspect, although such an opinion would be historically irrelevant. The changing face of armies, we have to take into account that the changing face of armies is initiated by the fall of the West, a fall which indeed only we are actually responsible for. I mean, Russia's foreign ministry earlier demanded that the United States explain to the world why it supported a military biological program in Ukraine. These allegations were denied by the Pentagon. I mean, that was in Reuters Wire. It was a content service, I think, online. And this is the very point. Social media seems to be taking over everything. We are letting it. We're letting the whole wokedom bleed into our social media. And as it presents us with facts which we take on board, facts which are partially true, we also have to take on board the wokedom at the same time. I think someone once said the best lie is one that is disguised in truth, or it was something like that anyway. I'm not entirely sure what it was, but the point still stands. We have to take into account our realization of priorities here. I mean, the fact that the Russians and the Ukrainians aren't like us. I think we can stand by and say the Ukrainians are more like us. We indeed today we're sort of idealizing Zelensky in the way that he is sort of like a father figure or an icon. He is an icon for pride and for we are standing tall, we are standing proud and looking after ourselves. Definitely. But this is not taken dispassionately. None of these equations being taken dispassionately. If we look what Zelensky has recently quoted. I mean, he's recently quoted, he's quoted the "fighting on the beaches" speech by Churchill, just to make the point. He tried to again, like I said before, he tried to push himself forward as exactly like us. He was the model for the Western world in that he was trying to play his cards as best he could, as anyone would in his position. I mean, no one could blame. And this is the very point. Power is fluid. It is like water. It's like the ocean. It runs. It trickles through leaders' hands. It allows malleability within the social structure to which it is involved. I mean, Durkheim said, he said, to pursue a goal which is by definition unattainable is to condemn oneself to a state of perpetual unhappiness. One asks oneself, is that what we're doing? We do not have an extensive source of oligarchs. Oligarchs are predominant in Europe, and particularly in Russia and the Ukraine. I mean, for example, the oligarchs are funding this to a major extent, devoid of sanctions. They are funding it, and regardless. I mean, for example, the CBS reports basically many oligarchs have, in fact, two-facedly, many oligarchs have begun to move their yachts into the Maldives, where they attempt to shield themselves from Eastern European sanctions. I mean, that was stated the other day by a squire. I mean, the bare two-facedness of it is just unreal, to be quite honest with you. Now, talking about two-facedness, there's Boris Johnson, for example. He rejected calls to offer more help on the low energy costs that the war in Ukraine is imposing upon all of us through sanctions. I mean, they're heightening energy next month. I mean, what's that? I mean, it's literally, we are paying for this war. It's incredible. Boris Johnson said, basically, he is trying to lower the energy cost, which in fact is just pure sounding off. It's just a way in which to allay. It's just another instance of history bleeding into social democracy. conservatism, for example, full of mediocrity, as we all know, we all know and love. The Western superstructure, that indeed encapsulates the lot, doesn't it? The Western superstructure. It all flows into this massive influx and subsumation of social media, the recent causes on social media, the distraction that's caused the UK and America just move. They've become weak, basically. We are now weak. We've BLM, we've got the Me Too with the LGBTQ, intersectional feminism, critical race theory. Where are we going? Even last year or something, or maybe last month, or time escapes me anyway, there was an anti-staring campaign. An anti-staring campaign? That actually, it was all to do with sexual equality and so on and so forth, and all that sort of thing. It's all just surface level stuff. Surface level stuff, really. And to compound the issue, Boris Johnson announced the UK government is looking to create a scheme to offer homes to Ukrainian refugees. He said we've done more than any other country to resettle vulnerable people since 2015. It doesn't blowing your whole hole, and I don't know what is. He said, but then there is a huge opportunity for us right now to do even more. The ancient Vandals who actually took down the last superpower that dominated the world said, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. That was Gierma. That's all this is. It's just vanity. We're reflecting pain across the water to sublimate our own vanity. How disgusting can you be? But then again, that is power. That is how it works. The weak, of which we are, is born to the superior, which Russia and Ukraine currently are. Why? Because we let them. Who are we? What are we doing? You see, whereas we tend to fight for ideals, and today, at least, postmodernism fights for idealism. Idealism is useless when confronted with an enemy, someone who's going to take your power away. But no one took our power away. We gave it to everyone. We are so different, it's unreal. This is why we cannot relate. Whilst we are fighting for idealism, they took advantage of that, as well they should. And they fought for their hearth and home. It's privatizationism. That's what the UK and the US currently deal in. They're currently sinking in their own arses, basically, at the end of the day. They're just like pushing themselves up there. What's in them? But patriotism is something which needs to be re-established, as has already been said, I think, by myself. Europe, the economics, National Economic Security Program, they said in Tel Aviv the other day, on the 9th of March, I think it was put out there. They said Europe will need to feel the pain of current sanctions, and since they don't have any alternative at the moment, that's hard for them to do. Man can decide for himself what he wants to be. Ergo, nations can do the same thing. St. Augustine said, man is born into shit and piss. This has been said so many times. I think it's just the individualism. We can establish individualism still. We're looking in the wrong place. We're looking at individualism as something which can be possessed whim. We are given individualism. That individualism we are given by nature is something we have. something we should cherish, not something we should just give away. And that's where our weakness lies. I think that the 4th century writer, Libinus, he said, a slave is one who will at some point belong to someone else, whose body can be sold, and what could be more humiliating? For indeed, has not that body been mutilated and the soul utterly destroyed? We have destroyed our own souls and given them the husks to someone else to fill. We do not believe in our own liberal attitudes anymore. We spout them, we produce them, but we do not believe in them. We have liberal conservatism, but conservatism isn't liberal. This is the problem. Perhaps it's horizontal fragmentation. Perhaps horizontal fragmentation, we're splitting ourselves down the middle. An action that produces modern organic solidarity. It's no longer functionalism. We can't really find much to compare it with. Apart from last time we had this kind of issue going on was the Civil War. I mean, how bad can you get? I mean, that last statement about functionalism, that was propounded by Durkheim. We have to start looking back insofar as the Magna Carta, for example. It's not the Magna Carta of 1215. We're talking about the Magna Carta of 1226, when Henry III, he took over. So John's son, basically, and he re-established the basis upon which our system can be formulated, and it moved upwards. I mean, since then we've had so many reformations of Parliament. The last 2 major established reformations of Parliament were in the late 1900s. It wasn't enough. But we have been re-establishing ourselves since then, and it's been jolly good. But we have got to a point now. It's the point, what they might or might not call sometimes the point of no return, whereby we are no longer functioning as individuals anymore. We are now functioning as a collective consciousness, if you may. It just doesn't work. Commercialist outlets in Russia, in Ukraine, they're all pulling out. We're talking about mobile, we're talking about McDonald's, we're talking about they've recently closed 850 restaurants in Russia, I think. It's hugely symbolic. And the mobile phone companies, they're not doing too well either. They've recently signed contracts. They've signed contracts with Russia to sort of re-establish political alliances and trade groupings, but they had to pull out of Russia whilst this thing is going on. This is ridiculous, which impacts on our own sanctions as well. All because we are so introverted. It's unreal. Recently, the US government said the CIA director, in fact, Bill Burns, he said, there is no sustainable political end game in the face of what is going to continue to be fierce resistance from the Ukrainians. How does he know that? How does he know that, Putin? How does he know? He is looking at it from a Western point of view. More of a sort of an Americanized or UK point of view. He's looking at it from our point of view. They are not the same peoples. They are not the same. I mean, since Zelensky has emerged, he's been quite dominant. He has recently said that he would not surrender to Russia, and he was addressing the nation. And there were rumours that Russia had captured Kiev. He said, we are here. Our soldiers are here. We are defending freedom and our country. It will continue. Autocracy, it was said by Leo Tolstoy, is a supernatural form of government. that may suit the needs of a Central African tribe, but not those of the Russian people. That is why it is impossible to try and maintain this form of government except by violence. Now, violence is all well and good. It's the consolidation of power. It is the way in which power is maintained. What with Zelensky citing Shakespeare and so on and so forth, we are forced to reflect on the propaganda that went on all through history. Most recently, as anyone here listening will remember, we have the propaganda that was used in the First and Second World War. We had a phenomenal amount of propaganda going on, both in the UK and the US. And we have to look at that kind of propaganda. That forces people to recognise who the enemy is. Now, we have to remember that self-sacrifice of external nations is so similar to us as it has been in the past. So similar. And yet, in postmodernism, in the context of postmodernism and modernism, moreover, we have to see the shift has been so detrimental to our structure. It's unreal. Karen von Hippel, who was the non-political senior advisor, said that President Putin could potentially target non-NATO nations in Eastern Europe, such as Moldova and Georgia. He said it's very unclear at this stage that anyone can convince Putin to do anything other than what he wants to do. Education is always paramount in any social structure. It is paramount. Education. In the West, obviously, we have so many literate people going on. We have so much educational history, intellectual educational history, dating back to when our universities were founded. The first universities were founded centuries ago. But it creates an individualism aside from your country. It didn't used to be like that. Obviously, back in the day, it used to be that education helped you to understand what it was to be British, or what it was to be American. I mean, British people consider what it is to be American to be, whereas alternatively it can be the other way around. But that's not the case with other nations. I mean, according to a British economist, Francis Faircross, he says Ukrainian education is too inward-looking, it is too corrupt and too poor to do a good job. Now, this is almost critical education, again, as described by Emil Durkheim. But it's not wrong. It's just different. It doesn't need to be wrong. I mean, it's not the kind of education I would like, or perhaps even that which you would like, but it is still not wrong. They say the Human Rights Initiative finds the Ukraine is fulfilling 84.2% of what they should be fulfilling on the right to education based on the level of income. But then again, on the other hand, you see, their level of income is actually higher than ours. What does that say about our own economy and the sanctions which we are actually imposing upon other governments, and that is reflecting upon our own? If we further that and we look at theology within tradition, identity, as far as theology is concerned, it was defined by us in the 70s and 60s by what you want rather than what you do. Today, we define identity by what you do to yourself, what you do to others, the impact what you do to yourself has on others, how we should be seen, how we should be heard, what we should do about that, and it's all seeping into our governmental system. I mean, people today, they are not sure. From the word go, they're not sure, and they're being moulded into shapes before they can even work things out for themselves. This is not the case elsewhere. Does this matter? No. We are creating a curve into... Are we creating a curve in religious development, perhaps? I don't know. Certainly, there is something to be looked at.
Give us a good clicking.
Shakanaka.